Let me welcome Andrew Murphy, who will be speaking about building a culture of healthy conflict in tech teams. Very interesting. Andrew started as a software engineer himself, and after a decade of tech leadership, he's now helping new and emerging tech leaders become happy, confident, and effective. His company, Tech Leaders Launchpad, currently focuses specifically on the new and emerging leader space. And his favorite icing flavor is rum and rice. Welcome, Andrew.
How's that volume level at the back? Is that okay? Yes. Yeah, cool, awesome. Okay, just so I can kind of get a bit of a gauge of who we've got in the room, if you would count yourself as a developer or engineer, just raise your hands. Cool. If you would count yourself as a leader, manager, typey person, yeah, cool. Yeah, the lines are a bit blurry, aren't they? Staff or principal engineer, something like that.
I want to be.
I don't count as a leader, but staff and principal engineers are leaders. Okay, so I like to start my talks by telling a bit of a story. I do this for a couple of reasons. The first reason is because research shows that it allows you, the audience, to empathize and connect more content. Research also shows that if I tell you a story that humiliates me, it helps you empathize, connect with me, and rate my talk higher. So I'm going to do that. Like I said at the intro, I've been in tech about 20 years. I've been leading just over 10 years. And I started really, really early in leadership. By the time I was 24 years old, I had a team of 10 people. And I don't say that to make myself sound good, because I was a bad leader. A really, really bad leader. What 24-year-old knows how to be a professional level of leader of people? So I made a bunch of mistakes, and this is one of the mistakes that I made. So there was me, lead engineer, senior engineer, and junior engineer. So lead, senior, and junior. Me and the senior were having let's call it an impassioned debate about how we were going to build a particular part of the system. Ideas were going back and forward, voices were raised, body postures were, let's say, assertive. And at the end of this impassioned debate, I felt like we'd come to a good conclusion on how we were going to build this particular part of the system. As I was reflecting on the discussion, I realized that the junior had not said a single word the entire time. And because I was so passionately debating, I hadn't realized it at the time. So being 24 years old, new leader, I thought, okay, perfect. This is an opportunity for me to teach the junior engineer about assertiveness. A week later, the junior engineer handed in her notice. And she cited that situation as the reason why. She said that she didn't feel like this was a place where she could learn and express herself. She felt it was a place where the loudest voices win. That was a really hard learning point for me, because she was an amazing junior engineer that I was. So this sent me down this pathway of learning a lot of what you might call soft skills. I don't like the term soft skills because they're really freaking hard to learn. So I prefer people skills or professional skills, business skills, whatever you want to call them. I've spent a lot of time learning this stuff. I was not naturally gifted at this at all. I was diagnosed on the autistic spectrum when I was about 8 years old. But let me tell you, interpersonal skills are not my forte, naturally. But I've spent 20 years learning and getting better at this stuff. And that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about why that conflict that I had with the lead, me, the lead, the senior, and the junior, was not a healthy conflict. Why? Okay, so yeah, we're going to discuss, I've used the term healthy conflict in the intro to this, so I want to talk a little bit about what is the difference between healthy and unhealthy conflict. We're going to talk about why we want healthy conflict. You might think, okay, let's just get rid of all conflict from our teams ever and never have a conflict. I'm going to tell you why that's a bad idea. And then we're going to talk about how we can ensure that healthy conflict is what it is. And then we've got time at the end, we're going to do that. We are running a little bit behind schedule, so we don't have time for Q&A. I'm here for the rest of the day, so please just continue. This is not a monologue. I do not want to sit here and talk at you for 30 minutes. I will get bored of my own voice, which means you definitely will. Please shout out the points I ask questions, and for the benefits of the recording, I might repeat your questions so that my voice is getting recorded, yours isn't. So I might repeat your question, that's why I'm doing it. If you're wondering who I am, I'm Andy Murphy, born in the UK, you can probably tell from the accent, long-term father of a flock of ducks, or as we call them in England, chickens, short-term father of a flock of humans, or as we call them in England, financial burdens. And I love traveling the world, seeing everything, getting out there, visiting as many countries as I possibly can. Before COVID, I had a life goal to visit 2 new countries every year. And I met that goal from 21 until COVID. Sounds amazing when you grow up in Australia. Remember, I grew up in Europe. Visiting 2 countries is just driving in a circle. Got back on track. Last year I visited 4 new countries. This year I visited 2. So we're getting that, getting back. From a professional point of view, started straight out of uni as a cold fusion developer. Anybody remember cold fusion? Yeah. Don't. It's not. XML is a programming language, like open angular bracket, if space, expression equals, quote, bad. So I didn't let that hold me back. So my second job out of uni, VB6 developer. Also a terrible language. Didn't let that hold me back. So my third job out of uni, PHP developer. So that was a bit more controversial. But yeah, I got into leadership really early, spent a lot of time learning from my mistakes. And one of the problems with being a leader is if you're an engineer and you make a mistake, the computer doesn't care. If you give the computer broken code and ask it to compile it 10 times, it really doesn't care. It just gives you a warning. Humans care if you do the same broken thing 10 times. So I started learning how to get better at this stuff because I don't want to be a bad leader. I want to help people. In their careers, and now I've shifted to be helping people, by teaching, training, coaching leaders. So I said this wasn't going to be a monologue. First question, what can cause conflict? What's some examples of things that can cause conflict? I promise this is not just like a big one. Yes?
The conflict between the way things have always been done and the way things you think should be done.
Yeah, so things could be been a particular way for a long time. Somebody's trying to institute change, and that causes friction. Yeah, definitely. So another hand go. Yeah.
Ego clashing.
Egos. Yeah, we love those egos. Oh yes, egos conflict. Yeah.
Miscommunication.
Miscommunication. I love that one. So you could be both trying for the same thing and working alongside each other really, really well, but you just don't understand.
Difference of opinions.
Difference of opinions, yeah. So what is it about difference of opinions that can cause conflict?
I feel like there's 2 people seeing 2 different ways, best ways forward for themselves, and they just don't find it communicated properly, or they have different sort of viewpoints of the situation.
Yeah, so they might agree with the destination, but they don't necessarily agree with the journey on how to get there.
Superiority.
Sorry?
Superiority.
Superiority, yeah. If you've got it's often called the HIPPO, the highest paid person's opinion. That often is the thing that causes conflict.
Multiple goals.
Multiple goals, yeah, definitely. We'll talk about that in a bit. If you've got people in a situation who are striving towards different goals, that can cause conflict. Okay, last one. Cultural differences. Yes, thank you. Cultural differences. Like I said, I'm somebody from the UK, and the way business is done in the UK is quite different. There's often 2 conversations happening at the same time. There's the words you're saying, and then there's what you actually mean. And the distance between those in the UK is quite large. If you said, for example, I'm not sure about that, what you actually mean is that's the worst idea I've ever heard. Those cultural differences can cause a lot of friction. So here's some examples for me. If we're debating, should we build this thing in in Swift or Objective-C? Should we build this thing in Kotlin or Java or Flutter or Dart rather? Choosing a design pattern, you know, are we gonna use CQRS? Do we build this thing or buy this thing? It can often cause a lot of conflict. Code reviews, obviously, if you've got comparing styles and ways of doing something. What do I mean by knowledge hoarding? Asymmetrical access to information. Yeah, asymmetrical access to information. Often there can be somebody who feels like their job is protected by holding on to information. And they can't be got rid of if they hold this information. It's called knowledge hoarding. Ego-driven code ownership is somewhat related to that. This is my code. You don't touch my code. Also called mortgage-driven development. Denying promotions, this obviously causes a lot of conflict potentially. Road mapping and sprint planning, should we do this thing or this thing? And then working style, communication preferences, cultural differences. What you often find in a lot of these is a through line of two things: high stakes and or high emotions. So if the conversation you're going to have has high stakes associated to it, so if the impact of this conversation is going to be big, then often there could be a conflict arising. Or if there's high emotions associated with it, that can cause a conflict. So that's my first thing I want you to take away, is if you're looking at your week and you're kind of going, these are the things I'm going to do this week, if you see a meeting or a discussion or something with somebody, ask yourself the question, is there going to be high stakes to this meeting? Or are there going to be high emotions associated with this meeting? And if the answer to either of those questions is yes, that's your cue to start thinking, okay, how can I turn this into a healthy conflict, not an unhealthy conflict? And we'll talk about the difference between those now. So if I was to say to you, you've all come to this talk, you see the title healthy conflict. So what do you think is the difference between healthy and unhealthy conflict?
The ability to hash things out without becoming aggressive, overly assertive, abusive.
Yeah, trying to stop those high kind of aggressive, assertive emotions. Yeah, definitely.
It's about the specific business or technical issue at stake, and not about the personalities or the people.
Yeah, it's about the thing you're trying to solve, not people. We'll definitely come back to that.
Ultimately, it's like solving the problem, because if not, you could have another conflict and take it to another health.
Yeah, if you don't solve the problem, is it a health conflict or an unhealthy conflict? Still could be both. Like the situation where you have a healthy conflict, still not solve the problem. But I do agree that if you end that and you haven't solved the problem, it's more likely to be unhealthy. Last one.
The goals of the parties involved are clear, even if they're different.
Yeah, the goals are clear if they're different. I slightly disagree with that, because this is my definition. I actually think it's more likely for you to have an unhealthy conflict if the goals are different. You still can have a healthy conflict if the goals are different, but it's definitely much more likely it will be unhealthy if the goals. So if you've got two teams or two people who are pulling towards different destinations, it's much more likely you'll have an unhealthy conflict. If the people involved in the conflict are lacking respect and trust for each other, more likely you'll have unhealthy conflicts. And if you've got an assumption of negative intent, what do I mean by that? I mean, say for example, that the narrative that you've got in your head is so and such wants this thing, not because it's the best thing for the company, because it's the best thing to get promoted. Or they've got a friend that's running a business and they want us to use that business, not because it's the best supplier, but it's because it's their friend. That's what I mean by assuming negative intent. So these things are those indicators again. So again, if you see that meeting on the horizon and you've said to yourself, okay, there's high stakes or high emotions associated with it, this is where you then have your second check of, are there likely to be misaligned goals around? A good example of that, and I'm reticent to use this example because it doesn't have to be this way, but it often is this way. sales, delivery. There's this narrative that sales just wants the dollars and delivery just doesn't want to do anything. And so you often end up in a situation where sales have done it again, they've sold something that they shouldn't have sold. And that's where you can end up in this situation. There are ways to solve that problem, which I don't have time to go into, but we can talk about that afterwards if you want. But that's a good example. And it also follows through to the second thing of lacking trust and respect. So a good indication of this, did anybody pick up on the phrasing that I used a minute ago? What was wrong with what I said? Sales always wants flat. What is sales? Sales is a string in an HR information system. A string can't want something. A human being can want something. And so if you're referring to a group of people, often this is, oh, that's what the business wants. The business isn't something. The business is a string in the asset database. So if you're using this terminology, you're grouping people together as opposed to talking about individual humans, it's a good indication that you're going wrong straight away. So if you see yourself using that terminology or you hear somebody else using that terminology, it's a good indication that one of those three on the left is missing. Does that make sense? Yes.
I would have picked up on the other word, which is always.
Yes, that's another thing that I said wrong in that sentence was always. That often is a follow-on from the first one. So if you're grouping the humans together into a silo, then you often use this generalized language of always. So if you're talking about a human, you're less likely to say that. You still can, and if you do say it, it's probably a problem. But yeah, definitely that's also not a good thing about always. This is summary, which is if you have an unhealthy conflict, people win. If you have a healthy conflict, ideas win. It's what the gentleman at the back said earlier. This is what we want. We want ideas to win. If you ever leave, has anybody ever left a conflict and felt, oh, Jonathan won that, or Jessica won that debate? And it kind of feels a little bit dirty because it might not have been the best idea. It's the loudest person, or the most assertive, or the person that just wouldn't shut up. Or, like we said in the beginning, the hippo, the highest paid person in the team. This is what we're trying to avoid. We want the best ideas to win, not the loudest people. And so we're trying to head towards this idea of helping. So why do we want ideas to win, as opposed to people? Why do we want ideas to win?
Because often if you take two different ideas and putting them with each other, you grab opportunities that join the two ideas together, come to a different place that you started on. Whereas with people, if you start with person A, person B, it's always one of those.
Ideas are more mutable than people's opinions sometimes. Yeah.
Real case, ideas outlast people.
Ideas outlast people. Perfect. Love that. Yeah.
You don't want the team to shy away from conflict.
Yeah, that's a really big one. If you have unhealthy conflicts a lot in your team, people are going to start withdrawing from those conflicts and not putting their ideas forward because they don't feel like their ideas are listened to. So even though you might have got the best idea in that one particular circumstance, you're setting the team up for failure in the future. Yeah.
Any practice could be wrong, but if you're letting people win, then it's up to sort of their charisma and clout, which could mean something that doesn't work is promoted.
Yeah, definitely. Just because somebody's a really good speaker, a really good debater, an argumenter, doesn't mean I do the best idea. So these are some of the ones that I think improves problem solving, which is everything we've just been talking about. Enhances team cohesion because people are more willing to put their ideas forward. Encourages accountability. Has anybody ever been in a debate or a conflict and then a particular idea was chosen and it wasn't your particular idea. And then that idea failed, and you just thought, I didn't choose that one anyway. That happens all the time. It's something, something called the IKEA effect. Has anybody heard of the IKEA effect? It's in a few head nods. So the IKEA effect is a really interesting psychological bias, a cognitive bias. What it is, they did some research where they got a bunch of people to build IKEA furniture. And then they asked those people to value that furniture in terms of dollars. Then they got another group of people in the room and asked those people to value the furniture as well. You got two sets of people. The people who built the furniture and then valued it, and the people who just saw the furniture and valued it. Consistently, the people who built it and then valued it, value it at 20% higher than the people who saw it and valued it. This tells us something deep about humans. It tells us that we disproportionately weight the value of things which we create something. So when we make something, when we're involved in that process, we value it high. So you can use this to your advantage. You can use this to make people feel accountable for the outcomes. Or you can forget about it and people give up on the ideas at first sight of so if people feel like they were part of that debate and part of that conflict, they're much more likely to feel accountable. Also fosters innovation, you've got ideas going everywhere, talking about everything. Open communication, people feel psychologically safe to share things, breaks down silos that we talked about earlier. If it's not sales safe, you can actually start having debate. Increases resilience and adaptation to change. If we've got people who are sharing ideas, discussing things, trying to think it out, you're improving their resilience and facilitating people personal growth. If you've got somebody who is willing to put an idea forward and try it, it helps them grow and helps promote their learning. So here's the question now. You know what healthy conflict is, you know what unhealthy conflict is. How do you know if you're in an unhealthy or a healthy conflict? Okay, the two words I want you to think about are safe and dialogue. Dialogue. Dialogue is easy. Dialogue means not a monologue. If you've only got one person talking in a meeting, it's not a dialogue. So it's a monologue. So to have a dialogue, you've got to have multiple people speak. Safe, I mean psychologically safe, the ability to share your ideas, not feel like you're going to get battered down and people, willing to just put themselves out there even if they're not sure the idea is a good idea. So if you have safe dialogue, it's more than one person talking and people are willing to share their ideas, then you have the great alignment for healthy conflict. If you don't have a dialogue or you don't have a psychologically safe environment, you're much more likely to have an unhealthy conflict. So how do you recognize whether you're in a place where you have safe dialogue or not? The psychological and sociological research uses two words here that I don't like. The words they use are silence and violence. I find those words too violent. So I come up with my own terminology for this, which is withdrawing dialogue and forcing dialogue. So what does forcing dialogue look like?
We think on the spot to make them answer a question.
Yeah. Like if I'm somebody who's kind of default behavior to conflict is to kind of get in there, physically, what does it look like? It can be hands on hips, it can be moving forwards, it can be a louder voice, it can be me trying to use my physical presence to take over the conversation. So if you see somebody doing that, chances are they're forcing dialogue. What does withdrawing dialogue look like? The opposite. It's sat back. It's maybe disengaging. If we're in a remote meeting, then he's turning your camera on too. It's this idea that I'm taking my ideas away from you and I'm not injecting them in. So if you see either of these two behaviours, somebody either physically moving forward or their volume of voice or the assertion to their language goes up, chances are they're voicing dialogue. If you see somebody sitting back, arms crossed, relaxing, chances are they'll withdraw dialogue. Sorry to pick on you, I know you're a speaker, so you probably won't mind this. Currently sat with his arms crossed. Probably doesn't need his withdrawing dialogue. So you've also got to be conscious of the norms of a particular person. So if somebody generally is in a meeting and generally sits there with their arms crossed, doesn't mean they're always withdrawing dialogue in every single meeting. And so what's the norm for them? Are they exhibiting standoff? And how are we doing for time, everybody?
I was going to
Cool, so, fine, okay. Who feels like there's somebody who generally withdraws dialogue in a conflict? Yeah. Who feels like they generally force dialogue? Yeah. Who feels like they flip-flop between the two? Yeah. It's kind of, roughly 50-50 as to what people do in conflict. And again, it's less important what you default towards, and more important what should change. So if you're thinking about your own behaviour, being conscious and aware of what you tend to do is helpful for you recognising if you're in conflict. But my story in the beginning, I should have noticed that the junior was withdrawing dialogue, wasn't engaging. As the leader, I should have picked that up. I should have noticed and I should have engaged and recognized what's going on. Yeah.
I've just got a question that's a little bit of a tangent on this, but what do you think changes in the environment, I guess a lot of us work in, which is the Zoom call environment, where you've got no insight into what someone's doing if their camera's off, and even if it's on, a blank stare into the camera is like acceptable.
It's really hard, but the thing with remote work, so I love remote work. I'm never going back in an office 5 days a week. I'm sorry if you're opportunity folks to do that. I'm looking if I have the choice not to, so I've heard for myself. But one of the real downsides of remote work is that loss of kind of fidelity of communication and medium being the message, and the fact that we lose a lot of bandwidth in these sorts of things. But if you're in person, you get body language and posture and tone of voice and facial expressions. If you go remote, you lose posture because you generally just see this part of the person. You turn your camera off, you've lost facial expressions. You're on Slack, you've lost tone of voice, and so there's a lot of issues with it. I think the thing is you've got to be more expressive. You've got to help people be more expressive and building that psychological safe space where people can actually say the words. I feel like we're having an healthy conflict here. Like if you cannot say those words, then you need to fix that problem to leader. And it has a lot of issues. Yeah.
So people who are introverts, they tend to keep silent. And in the team meeting, their camera also turn on. So how do we deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of encouraging having debates and maybe you don't need it for the day stand up, but like if you're having an actual debate about something, I'm in big favour of having cameras on. I think that people lose so much fidelity. And again, I'm on the autistic spectrum. I find myself personally uncomfortable. I get people who feel uncomfortable, but I think the upsides for the whole team are worth a little bit of downsides. And you can pick and choose at the moment. So we are rapidly running to an end. So I do want to give us a couple of minutes of the Q&A at the end. So I do want to give you a couple of things to take away. So this is one of them. So this is a worksheet, which I'm an engineer. Even though I spend most of my time training people now, I'm an engineer by heart, and I love algorithms and processes and practices. And this is my algorithm for moving from an unhealthy conflict to a healthy conflict. This is a PDF that asks you a series of questions to take you through all of how this system can have this progression. So it takes you through, and go with the QR code back in a second. It takes you through what I call the pause process, which is how do you prepare to resolve the conflict? How do you listen to the people, understand what's going on, share your point of view, and then end the conflict? So this process takes you through how do you take an unhealthy conflict to become a healthy one. With that, we are going to end. I've got 3 QR codes here. I did lie, the QR code is not there. So there's the QR code again if you want it. Okay. There's 3 other QR codes in bottom. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, I do live streams regularly on LinkedIn. I've had people like Scott Hanselman and Charity Majors on my live streams talking about all the leadership type of topics. That's that QR code. If you want to find more about Tech Leaders Launchpad and what we do, that's the first one. If you want to have a chat with me about anything and get my advice, that's what the middle QR code is. I must have shown this QR code to 20, 30,000 people, and I've had 3 people book. And I think what it is they're worried that I'm going to try and sell you on Tech Leaders Launchpad for 20 minutes. I'm not. I love doing this stuff. I love talking to people. So please, if you want my advice on anything, you want to just vent about something, please feel free to book in 20 minutes with me. Please do not do what one of me did at a conference, which is book 3 back-to-back 20-minute sessions. An hour. That's taken the mic just a little bit. But yeah, please, if you don't manage to grab me today, please do feel free to book that. Thank you very much. See you again. Probably got that time for 1 or 2 questions.
Yes.
I'll keep short.
Yes, this isn't really a question, but I just did try to look up the 20-minute chat and it says every single day it's not available.
Thank you, I will fix that. And your question, Jim?
Do you have any like corollaries for healthy or unhealthy conflict in a written environment, either like an email chain or in a pull request? Like,
let's talk about that. So the question around like written communication, it's really the sense of what I was saying. Like you're using so much bandwidth in that communication, you've got to be injected all back in. So I'm a big favour of emojis and trying to get some of the colour around what you're saying back into the communication. People emojis are not professional. You kind of see that. Well, if I'm emailing the CTO of that, maybe I don't use emojis. But if people are working on a day-to-day basis, I'm just shoving emojis in everywhere. It helps add in a lot more content. Any more questions? I'm hanging around.